Hello everybody and welcome to another painting tutorial with myself, John. In this one we're going to be tackling Fenrir from Mythic Battles Ragnarok. A fantastic miniature, absolutely great. There's a few things in here that make it really easy for him to paint, primarily among which it's incredibly highly detailed. So if you're wanting to do something quick, contrast paint's your friend here. So I've taken a fair amount, I've taken a couple of contrast paints. I've used them as sort of the base colors and then worked my way up through some dry brushing and washes and so on. And the overall effect is satisfactory. I would be certainly happy to put this down on the table. Don't forget, that's the philosophy of 3 colors up. We want to get something that looks effective and you'd be happy to play with on the table. Don't worry about anything else. You can always revisit a model if you feel like you've improved over time or there's a particular effect you want to do better than you did the first time. So never forget that a miniature is only finished when you say it's finished. And in this case, we're trying to aim for something that looks good on the tabletop. And I think you're going to enjoy Fenrir. It's very simple, very quick, and a beautiful miniature to work on. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. So let's quickly talk about the priming process for Fenrir. I washed him first with some multi-purpose cleaner in some warm water, let him dry. I then sprayed him entirely with Citadel Chaos Black, and then he got a fairly substantial dusting with Grey Seer. Because the art I've seen of him and the Mythic Battles art that they've put out and the painted miniature that they've shown does depict him being very grey tone, very cold, but with the standout feature being this sword, which has a lot of glow to it. His eyes glow and there's blood coming out of his mouth and stuff. So it seems that the focus of the miniature is really going to be on the head and the face. So the rest of him is apparently going to be quite cold according to the art. So we're going to start off with a good old contrast paint. We're going to be working with Basilicanum Grey first, and we're going to put that all over the entire miniature. So always remember to shake the contrast paints up and get a nice, I've got a nice big soft brush, a big cheapy soft brush. And we're just going to apply this over the entire miniature. So let's see what Basilicanum Grey does for us here. And I suspect it's going to get us pretty close to what we want, but of course, even though I'm painting to do it quick and effectively, I still want it to look nice because Fenrir is just such a cool character. I was looking at his mythology. I was looking at the background to him and stuff while looking at the painted miniatures that I'd seen, and I was like, oh, this guy is badass. So we got to do something that's effective, but at the same time doesn't look like a rush job or doesn't look like a quick job. So I know with the amount of detail on this miniature, as you can already see, the Basilicanum Grey is doing a hell of a lot of work for us. Just because of the nature of the paint, it just gets into every detail on his fur, and it is probably the best example I've seen so far of how contrast paint is supposed to work. Just because of what that's doing to the miniature straight off the bat. That's exactly what we're looking for. So we're going to give the entire miniature this, and when we come back, or when it's dry, we'll move on and see what else we can do to the fur, just to, you know, we still want to make it look good, so we're going to try and see what we can do. And yeah, we'll work from there. We'll see what sort of liveliness we can get out of the fur detail on his back and such. With the Basilicanum Grey now dry, we're going to move on to another wash, and for this we're going to be using Citadel Air Abaddon Black. We've watered it down about 2 to 1 with some water using the same brush as we did before, and what we're going to do is just, again, we're going to give the whole miniature a coat of this, and what this is doing is bringing us right down into the darker shades that I've seen on the painted example. So let's just see how we get on with this. This is going to really bring it down for us, and I think it's probably going to bring us as dark as we want it to be, and then we can start working up maybe a few highlights or a few different tones in through the fur perhaps. Now you're probably wondering why I didn't go with Black Templar straight away, and you know, that is a very valid question. I wanted the fur to have a grey undertone to it, and basically have everything else work around that. So Black Templar would have basically probably done a very similar effect, but I would have had less control over it. It would have just been essentially painting the model black, and I didn't really want to do that. I want to try and avoid just going like pure black on any color if I can avoid it initially. So yeah, that's the idea with it. So I definitely wanted there to be some sort of grays and stuff underlying. Now, I'm sure there's better painters out there than me that will say, you know, Black Templar would have just did this anyway, and you know, fair point. But I think two simple steps to get the fur basically done is fine, in my opinion. I wouldn't have wanted to do it in one step. Just because this miniature is just so nice, I wanted to give it a bit more justice. And yeah, I think in general, a lot of this Mythic Battles range really does just want a lot more attention. But because of the sheer level of detail they put into a lot of their sculpts, you can really get away with more simple techniques. And I'm sure there's a lot of professionals that will go absolutely crazy and create some amazing pieces, and that's cool. That's absolutely cool. I love looking at that stuff. But always be careful about what you take as inspiration. You know, don't bite off more than you can chew, I guess. Like in Fenrir's case. But, you know, I had to really try hard to get that bit of mythology in there. Sorry. Maybe I should just shut up and paint. So I'm leaving the camera on this time because I want to show you just how quick some of these steps are. A lot of the times I cut off and then come back when they're dry, but in this stage I just want to show you how quick this can be done. You know, it's not a big deal, it's not very time consuming, and we get the job done pretty quick. Although when you're going for a wash all over your miniature, do take the time to rotate the model around and check out, just in case, because you can miss stuff quite easily. I miss stuff all the time, to be honest with you. So it's always good to check over every angle that you can, make sure you're getting the paint right into where you want it to. Like an example here and behind the mane, I've been missing a few spots here and there, so I want to make sure we get those before we carry on and wash the brush off. Up there as well. That's basically it. Okay, cool. So again, we're going to let this dry, and when we come back, we'll see if there's any sort of highlighting we want to do to that fur. So with the black paint wash not entirely dry, but certainly a lot more dry than it was, we're going to do a little bit of a dry brush over the whole mini, or at least on the upper surfaces of the mini. And what we're going to go with is Citadel Administratum Grey. And what I'm trying to do here is just to pick out some light detailing, particularly on the edges of the fur here. So what I'm doing is just sort of vertical motions with the brush. And all I'm aiming to do is to catch those upper edge details, just to bring a bit more definition into the model after we've, you know, fairly muddied some of those details with our two, you know, our contrast paint and our paint wash. So this is just to get some of the shape and the detail back out of the fur. So I'm trying not to go too heavy, but the idea is that we want enough of that fur detail to come back again. So need a little bit more paint on our brush. Make sure we have enough, just so that we're catching those edges. because I really don't want to lose the intricate sculpt. All those tiny details that have been sculpted into the mini just look fantastic and make that appearance really striking. And I know this means that I'm not going as dark a miniature as the painted example that Mythic put out, but I think what we are getting is very interesting. Just being nice and gentle with this. I want to bring out a lot more of that sculpted detail on the face. And on these heavier patches of fur on his back, on this sort of mane that he has going on here. And then down the back. And you can see what we're getting at here is just a very interesting sort of appearance. Now, I'm going to do another wash, and you're probably going to be thinking, how many washes am I going to use on this? Well, I can tell you short as many as it takes. So I think we're going from all our blacks and stuff, and we're going to go with an Agrax Earthshade this time, just to add a bit more of, I like where we're going. We have all this dark and grey, but I kind of want a little touch of warmth, not a lot, just a touch of warmth to come back into it. And I think the Agrax is going to help with that. It's also going to tone in what we've just done as a dry brush, but we're going to go fairly light with it. We're not going to go completely mad with the amount of wash here. So as you can see, that is also going to help with the definition of the detail, and what it's going to do is give us a very slight brown tinge to all this excellent detail. Because some of the art I've seen of Fenrir, he's made out of wood, he's made out of vines, and a lot of them just depict him as a really huge friggin' wolf. So kind of leaning on a little bit of both art styles here by trying to warm what is quite a cold miniature with a little bit of a brown wash. And I think this is going to work rather well. So again, we're just going to get to it. And when it's dry, we can move on. And if this fur detail needs any more, which I don't think it will, I think we've done enough to the fur now. What we'll do once this is dry is move on to facial details and start to work up this really striking, what I've seen as a very striking looking hit of color on the model. So I really want to try and work on that as best I can, make that the more definitive feature of this miniature. So with the Agrax Earthshade dry now dry, sorry, we can have a look at starting to add some other details. Now, generally that fur is looking quite good. I'm quite happy with that. It's simple, it's effective, it uses the detail of the sculpt to its advantage, and we've got an interesting array of coloration going on there. We've got an overall sort of brownish tone, but we still have the greys poking through as well. So not every step was a complete loss. Now, we're going to start base coating the areas that we want to play with. So we're going to be looking at eyes, mouth, and this sword blade here as well. So for that initial base color, we're going to go with white scar. Just a plain old layer paint white. Nothing too special there. We're going to need to probably give this a couple of coats just to make sure that we have a nice solid color. So that's what we're going to aim for now. And it's just going to be a case of just applying this paint until we have the piece completely white. So we're not going to go over each piece too much. We're going to put the white all into the mouth, into the jaw, because I want as much going on in there as possible. We'll hit the teeth, get into all the recesses with the white as well. Now, if I'm careful enough, we're going to try and do it on the eye as well. Make sure that I have enough white just to get in there. In fact, I think I have a better idea. I'm going to take the white just beyond the eyeball a little bit. Not too much, of course. And then we'll get the rest of the sword blade in. Like so. Work around the front of the jaw. Get the teeth. And then same again on the other side. We'll work across the jaw. We'll work the paint into the crevices as well. And this is all down to, again, some of the art where there's a glow that comes from his maw and comes from the eyes. It's sort of a volcanic, sort of really angry red, yellowy glow. So this is the beginning steps of me attempting, and I say attempting, please take this with a giant caveat or a bag of salt, trying to do something that's still simple, effective, and looks decent. So this is the opening stages of that, is getting this white down onto the parts that I want to have that glow on. So again, it's probably going to take a couple of coats to get it, but we'll get there. I do feel like this is worth a fair bit more attention than even the fur, because this is definitely, like I've said before, this is definitely one of the standout details of this miniature, is having this really dark character with very bright eyes and this sword almost glowing white hot. So I want to get a nice base coat of this white down to make sure we're starting off on the right foot with this. So we're going to have to let that dry for a little bit, and after that we'll start looking at, I think we'll play with some inks next. With the white dry, I did a couple of extra things here you can see under the shot. I've just widened the white out around this eye a little bit more to sort of match what's on the other one, so it's a bit more even when you see the model front on. This is also going to help with the next step, which is going to be adding the heat, that heat glow to everything. And we're using 3 intensity inks to get the ball rolling on this. So the first one is Hydromel Yellow from Green Stuff World. And this is going to be the first ink that we sort of just apply to nearly everything that's painted white. So we'll start on the sword blade. And we're going to just take this yellow And we're going to draw it down towards the bottom of the blade. Same on this side. Not taking it entirely all the way to the top and letting it draw itself down a little bit. We're also going to do the same into the jaw. At this point we know we're going to have to come back and paint the teeth again anyway, so it's not a big deal. Okay, then we're going to do the top of the blade just up here. And then each eye we're going to add a bit of this. So in that one, and in that one. Okay, so while the eyes are drying at least, and the jaw, we can move on to the second one, which is going to be Phoenix Orange. And we're going to take it and put it onto the sword blade as well, but we're going to start a little further down but do the same process. So we're going to start, say, about here. Get it into focus, and we're going to draw it down as well. Let the two colors sort of bleed in together a little bit. Bit like that. Quite simple, really. And I think then there's not really much we can do. Well, we can do a little bit of the orange right up at the top, just under the hilt of the sword, just like that. And again, just up in there a little bit, like that. So at the minute it looks a bit like an ice cream. The final one then is going to be Sanguinium Red. Now we'll take a bit of that. Again, we're working on the sword blade, and while these inks are still wet, what we're going to do is blend this down again to the bottom of the blade. Start a little further up on this side. Something like that. And hopefully you kind of see what I'm trying to aim for here. And to maybe help blend this along a little bit, I'm going to take a little bit more of our yellow and bring it up the way a little bit more. So it looks a little bit more uneven there. Now we're still waiting on the eyes to dry, so we're going to let this all settle for now, and then when it's dry we'll come back to it and continue with what we're trying to achieve. With the ink work so far dry, we're going to take some more of our Phoenix Orange and we're going to put it in and around, not over the center of the eye, but we're going to go around the edge of the eye and try and drop some of that color in there just to add a bit more depth to the eye. Probably got to be careful there because I'm probably adding way too much, but yeah, it's a tiny detail, so Certainly looks angry enough, that's for sure. And at the same time, I'm going to take a bit more of the orange and just work it into the blade. Just another layer. Like so. And then what I'm going to do is dip my brush in some water and thin out some of the orange. And we're going to seep it into the maw a little bit. Because now what we're ending up with is a very bright, angry glow building up, or, you know, I guess a glow. And yeah, so far so good. So again, we're going to have to let these layers dry. And I think maybe actually in the meantime, I'm going to take a little bit of color to the hilt of the sword. So we're going to lay back on an old reliable color, an old base coat. We're going to look at adding some Retributor armor to the hilt and the pommel of this sword. So real quick, we'll just be able to put a layer of that on. Because we know that brass or gold doesn't change color when it heats up, it just becomes a liquid state. So, but then again, you know, it's mythical fire. Mythical fire doesn't melt brass or gold. Apparently it just heats metal. So, oh, I don't know. Just, it's best not to question it sometimes and just roll with it. All right. So while that's drying, I'm going to quickly take another contrast paint just to get the handle of the sword. And we're going to use a bit of wildwood because it's a nice dark brown and I just need a dark color in there. So that's what we're going to do. Again, we're going to take the same brush, put a little bit of wildwood onto the end of the brush, and we'll just get that darker color put in. Being as gentle as possible, we don't want to go completely overboard. A bit like that. So that's not the worst looking in the world. Not really the best measurement for it, I guess. You know, this isn't the worst, so it's all right. Now, hopefully our last layers of ink are dry. And what we're going to do is take some of our red, our Sanguinium Red, and very carefully we're going to draw down the middle of the blade into the recess. Like that. So we've got a bit more depth to the weapon. Like that. It's a bit too heavy on that side, to be honest. But yeah, it'll have to do. So I'm going to thin out a bit of this red and I'm going to add it just in and around the eyeball, because then what we'll do after that is we will get a bit of white back in there and just paint that eyeball back in again. It definitely is quite angry looking. Now I know that's reversing the colors a little bit because it's going from really hot here to colder here, and it's going from almost a white to a red, but this is going from a red with a white center out to a yellow. So you know, it's a bit of a bit swings and roundabouts, really. I kind of like how that looks, so I'm going to take a bit more of the yellow and just go out a little bit more. This is probably a mistake, but I want to try and soften the edges of that a little bit, and I think the yellow is going to be the way to do it. Well, we'll see when it's dry, and then we'll put down a white into the center of the eye again. But until then, we'll just let this dry, and then we can come back to it. So we're going to get back to some detailing work here. First off, we're going to use our white scar that we used to base everything. We're going to start to paint in the teeth. And we're going to have to do that with a fairly small brush. And hopefully not make a mess of it. Although we probably will. You know, by this stage, you know what I'm like with tiny details. I'm just not that good at them. Yeah, not the best tooth job. So again, we're going to go into the center of the eye with some white. And just there's too much paint on the brush. Too much paint, not enough water on the brush, and that's going to cause a problem. So just the very center of the eye there. What I was trying to do is get a much thinner line than that, but that looks okay too. And I'm going to have to hold the model upside down because I'm awkwardly left-handed. Not just left-handed, awkwardly left-handed. Yeah, not the best, but it may just have to be that way. So in fact, I'm not satisfied with that eye at all. And I know when I say that, I'm about to make it worse. Yeah, didn't really do anything there. So it's a pain, but there you go. So at this stage, I don't think there's any other white I want to add. No. I'm going to close that white off and put it away. We're going to take some, let me see, do I have it still here? I'm going to take some more Agrax Earth Shade, and we're going to put it over the hilt and the pommel. Just to dull that in a little bit. Make it look like it's been there for a while, because I think it's meant to have been there for a while. I think that should be okay. Now, the last little bit that I want to do here is a little bit more on the sword. And we want to add a little bit of black to that as a dry brush. So we're going to return to our Abaddon Black Air, and we're going to use it as a dry brush. So I'm just going to have to very quickly, if you can see in the background, sort of just I know you should use a cloth for this, and the air paint probably isn't the best to do it either. But we'll see what we do, and what we're going to try and get out of this is sort of a darker part to the tip of the blade. You can see this Abaddon Black really doesn't like being dry brushed. We'll make the tip of the sword almost black. Might have to come back to that and do it again. Same on this side. Not the worst attempt at it. Could certainly be better. So maybe, here we go again with silly ideas. Maybe we'll take a bit of Abaddon Black and just paint it on nice and thinly. Same way we did with the inks, and we'll draw it down to the bottom of the blade. It looks a bit tidier on that side, whereas on the other side it doesn't look great at all. So let's see if we can do something about that. Yeah, I think that will do okay. So at this stage, guys, really all I can say is we're going to finish the model there. We're going to put a bit of paint down onto the base, give it all a matte varnish so that it's all sealed, and then we'll take a look at it once it's all done. Of course, there's probably plenty of room for improvement there, but again, we're trying to get something down on the table that still looks relatively effective. So let's get it all done and let's wrap up. Well, here is the finished Fenrir. With a little bit of paint that's just Adeptus. It's just Mechanica Standard Grey with a Basilicanum Grey contrast paint over it. The rest of the base just painted black. Now, there is one final thing I did do, which was I took some Grey Seer, some Citadel Grey Seer, and I did another dry brush just over the top of them again. And that's just lifted a lot more of that detail up, because I was looking at it thinking, maybe it's just a little too dark, or there's not enough contrast between the grey highlight areas and the darker recesses. So a little bit of a Grey Seer dry brush, and that helped immensely, as did applying a anti-shine matte varnish, the Army Painter one. Just brushed on this time. I usually airbrush them on, but this one seems to have worked alright. Overall, I'm quite happy with how he's turned out. There's a lot of learning curve there for me yet, on a personal note, because this I'm not overly happy with, but it does help the miniature stand out and give him a really sinister vibe. You know, the very dark wolf sort of thing with a molten sort of burning eyes and burning maw, and this sword that's been rammed through him to hold his mouth closed, or I think in the mythology it's his mouth open. Yeah, it's interesting, and this particular kind of effect is definitely something I need a lot of practice with. Perhaps it's time I start watching some tutorials of my own. But anyway, I give it a fair shout. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments. But overall, this is a tabletop ready miniature as far as I'm concerned. If I seen this, I'd be happy to play with it. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please leave your comments down below. And as always, stay safe, take care, and I will see you again very soon.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.